Alright, so this is an introduction to iOS programming using Xcode. So let's start off by firing up Xcode. You can go to Launchpad or you can do a search from up here, but after you install it, it's usually in the Launchpad. So here we have Xcode. Xcode is the IDE for iOS as well as OS X programming. So this is the first splash screen for Xcode. You can either create a new project from here, or you can say File, New Project. So I'll just go ahead and click on here. I'll end up in the same place. For our initial project, we'll be creating an iOS application as opposed to a framework. And also, as a side note here, you can also create projects for OS X, which is a Macintosh application. But we'll be creating an application for iOS. So click on application. For our first project, we'll just go ahead and use a simple single view application. And we'll call this our first app. And you can choose this to target an iPhone or iPad or universal, which means it supports both iPhone or iPad. I'll stick with iPhone for now. Click next. And on the next screen, you get to choose where you would like to place it. In this case, it's my last folder, which is called training, which is fine. If I want to change it, I can just drop down to its parent folder and navigate from there. But in this case, I'll stay with training. I'll say create. Goes ahead and creates my application for me, and it creates my first grouping of files, of source files here. Delegate as well as view controller. And this is source code, the initial source code. And we'll start off with the storyboard. Storyboard is a visual representation of the flow of screens within an iOS app. It's actually a whole code framework that Apple had created a number of years ago that was optimized so that it can be rendered on the screen, so a developer can conceptualize the flow of screens within an iOS application. So it's a little more than just a diagram, a visual diagram. It's actually a whole framework underneath it. But anyways, so this is a view controller. What we want to do initially is to add a button to this view controller, or this window, and it should open up a second window. So in order to do that, I'm going to use what's called a navigation controller. And a navigation controller is a framework that allows you to easily navigate from one, to drill down from one view to another view, and allows you a default menu to navigate back. So in order to put that into place, I'll select my default screen here, or default view controller, and I'll go into editor and embed in navigation controller. So what you see here is, I didn't place it very well because I ran out of space, but if I move them apart, you see that it automatically created what's called a navigation controller and a segue. Segue is sort of a visual representation of a path from one view controller to another. So this was my original view. So I'm going to go ahead and add a button here. And what you see here is a listing of all the controls and gadgets that you can embed into your view. And I will filter through this by typing in button. So it filtered out all the buttons available, and I would just choose the standard. Actually, this is not the one I want. I want this one. This is a standard button. So I'll go ahead and drag and drop this into my first view. Okay, it's a little plain and boring, but we'll embellish it later using either source code or some of the attributes you see here. Actually, let's call this go next. Okay. And that will change the text here. It opens up a bit. There. Okay. So what we have is our first view, and we want to add a second view here. Let's go ahead and look for a view controller. is what we want. View control, we'll drag it into here. So this is our second view. I'll go ahead and put a label in here to indicate that's a second view. Find control label. That's what we want. Label. Oops. Let's expand this a bit. Okay, now we control drag label here. It was too small previously, so I had to expand this or magnify it so that it would accept whatever I drag into it. So let's call this, let's just add the text, second screen. Okay, so that's the second screen. So what I want to do is control drag, so I'll press control and I'll drag this button to the second screen. It's going to be a push. So it created a segue for me. So without any coding, I just created a navigation from one screen to the other. So just to demonstrate, I'm going to go ahead and run this in the simulator by clicking on this little arrow here. So it builds it, and it builds succeeded. It just fired up the simulator. This is the iPhone simulator. So this is my first screen with the Go Next button. I'll click on that. And what happened is that we navigated to the second screen. As you can see, this navigation bar popped up with a little default button that says back. So that's all done for you by the navigation controller. So hit back and go to the original screen. So you can navigate like back and forth. Okay, so that's that. For my next video, I think I will go over modal windows and delegates. So, end this one.